All right, YouTube says we're live on a Wednesday night. Let's check and make sure. It looks like we got audio going tonight, so that's always good. We always like it when things work the first time we hit the button, as opposed to having to mess around like we did last week. I apologize to everybody who tuned in last week and we had a little bit of audio issues early on. I hope you stuck with us and didn't bail when you couldn't hear it. But we're here this week. It looks like everything's working, so I appreciate the technology for showing up, and appreciate you guys for tuning in. It's a Panther-Lair Show on a Wednesday night. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com is the where we stream, do the show live every Wednesday night for an hour at 8:30. Sometimes a little more than an hour, sometimes a little less than an hour, sometimes a lot more than an hour. We usually make it to 9:30, and then if we're still going strong, we keep going after that. But either way, it's an hour of all Pitt sports talk. It's a sports talk show that's really dedicated exclusively to Pitt, and or exclusively to talking about Pitt. And the fun thing about it is that we can interact. Of course, you get in the chat screen during the live stream, and you can post your comments and your questions, and really have a conversation. I mean, I'm going to sit here and talk about a bunch of things. I got a bunch of stuff I want to talk about tonight. But you can join that conversation too. You might hear me say something and you might have a reaction to it. You might have a question about it. You might have some other kind of question you want to ask. Hey, what's going on with this? What's up with that? Well, this is the opportunity to do it. We interact all week on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. You should know that website, Panther-Lair.com. I got the logo right here below me. If you're watching the live stream, you can't click that. It's not a link. It's just a graphic. But if you can type those letters into your web browser, and you'll go to Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Football, basketball, recruiting, transfers. We cover it all at Panther-Lair.com. And we have message boards where you can talk to other Pitt fans about what's going on in the world of Pitt sports. So, we have interaction there. New posts, new threads, new replies, new comments, and we go back and forth all day, every day. But this is a little unique here on a Wednesday night because, for better or for worse, you get to see me. For better or for worse, you get to hear my voice. And I get to read your comments sort of in real time or something close to it. We got a little bit of a delay here. But I get to read your comments in real time. And we almost have kind of a conversation. And so I like that element of it. And if you're listening to the podcast later in the week and you're like, hey, I want to get in there, I want to comment, I want to ask questions, I want to join this conversation and experience it live as it happens, Wednesday nights at 8:30, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We're knocking on the door of 2,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel. If you are here, you see the button right there. If you're watching the live stream or you're watching the video later, you see the button that says subscribe. Click it. Click to subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You'll get a notification every time we go live, so you'll never miss a live stream. And you'll make me feel better about myself because we'll get over that 2,000 subscriber mark. We're really trying to, it helps us out. You know what I mean? We get more exposure on YouTube. You get seen by more people. Click subscribe. That's big for us, and I really appreciate it. It's not like we're going to blow up your feed. You'll just get a little notification that says, hey, they're going live, or hey, they just posted a video of quarterbacks throwing to receivers. What else would you want to watch this time of year? Quarterbacks throwing to receivers, right? So subscribe to that. We appreciate it. You can like this video too. We certainly appreciate that as well. And then the last thing, if you want to get in on the conversation here tonight during the live stream, you want to make sure that your comment or your question doesn't get missed, because we'll get a lot there. It's already filling up. We already got comments and questions jumping in. If you want to make sure your comment or your question gets read or answered, you can be a super chatter. So right down at the bottom, you see that little dollar sign. You can click that, throw us a couple bucks, support the podcast. We appreciate that more than you can imagine. And we will, if you do that, we will definitely get to your comment or your question, even if it's something ridiculous. I'm not going to say any bad words, but we will definitely get to your comment or your question right here during the live stream if you are a super chatter. We get big shout outs all the time to the super chatters. RJCman38 is a super chatter, and he's there right away, jumping in, and all he asked is that we are on time with audio. So we had the audio working. Probably started a minute or two after 8:30, but I'd like to give everybody a chance to jump in there. So you know, RJC, man, thank you for being a super chatter. We appreciate it. Topics, topic-wise, you look like newsworthiness. I mean, Pitt basketball, I don't think there's been any new attrition or new transfers leaving since our show last Wednesday. Femi Odikale, rumors, everybody's thinking it might happen or thinking it will happen, and but nothing there. And so somebody asked on the board this week, do you think Femi Odikale... Actually, there was a thread on the message board about last week's podcast. In last week's show, when someone asked me, two questions. Do you think Jeff Capel can turn it around? And do you think Femi Odikale is going to transfer? And the message board thread was about the fact that I didn't really answer either one of those questions, which was pretty funny. We had a good conversation after that about, kind of why I answered those questions the way I did. That, Jeff Capel turning the program around. There's two questions there. Can he do it and will he do it? And the can he do it? Sure. I think a coach can turn a program around. I think a program can turn around rather quickly in college basketball. I think it takes time to build up certain elements of a program in college basketball. But in terms of your roster, I think you can turn it around quickly. You get one or two key pieces. You look at Iowa State. You look at Wake Forest. These are programs that engineer pretty quick turnarounds by adding a couple key pieces, largely out of the transfer portal. And so it can be done. Will he do it? I don't know the answer to that question. And so somebody said, boy, Chris did a great job of giving a non-answer. But, I mean, the non-answer is the real answer. I don't know if he's going to do it. And the reality is you don't either. No matter what your convictions are about, the job Jeff Capel has done or his, ability at his job or anything like that, you don't know if it's going to turn around. You don't know if it will improve. You might have strong opinions about whether or not he can turn it around, but you don't actually. I mean, you can't see the future is ultimately what I'm saying. And neither can I. And so that's why I say I don't know if it will turn around. I know it's possible. I think there's a blueprint out there. I think there's a path to success that a coach can follow. It's not easy. You have to get a little bit lucky in some cases. But there is a path to follow to success, and success doesn't have to be defined as a Final Four or a national championship. At the state, with the state of Pitt's program and what it's been, success and a turnaround could just be like winning like 17, 18 games. Knocking on the doorstep of 20 wins. And being on the bubble for the NIT or maybe making the NIT or being in a bubble conversation in February. I mean, that would count as progress. That would count as turning the program around. That would count as some amount of success. The bar is pretty low right now. It's been established pretty low by what has happened over the last 6 years. And so the question of can it be done? Yes. Will it be done? I don't know. And same thing with Femi Odikale. I don't know what's going to happen there. There are rumors, but the reality is, I mean, the last time I talked to someone about it a couple days ago, I don't even think Pitt really knew what to expect. I think Pitt, like most coaching staffs, sort of enters the offseason thinking, the reality is anybody could go. We don't think everybody's going to go, and there are a couple guys that we're pretty sure aren't going to go. But the reality is until they say we're not going, anybody could go. And so I think that's their approach with Femi Odikale. I think they're approaching it as if Femi's going to be on the team next year because he hasn't yet said that he won't. And so that's kind of my approach as well. He's on the team. Anybody is on the team until they say they aren't, right? And so Femi Odikale hasn't said that he's not on the team. He hasn't announced a transfer. He hasn't gone into the transfer portal, and he might, who knows, maybe during this hour, he might. Or right after we get done, maybe at 9:31. He'll go into the transfer portal, and everything I'm saying right now will be rendered moot. But as of this moment, at 8:41 p.m. on Wednesday night, he's not. Unless it happened on Twitter in the last couple minutes and I didn't see it. But he's not. And so it hasn't happened. It might, but it hasn't. And so, my answer of what do I think Femi Odikale is going to do, I don't know. All I know is that right now, still on the Pitt roster. So, got sidetracked there. Oh, and so I started off by talking about the fact that there was really no kind Basketball news, they just continue reaching out to transfers, continue trying to find guys that they can get out of the transfer portal, setting up Zoom calls, going out and visiting players, bringing guys on campus, trying to figure out who fits. And there are a lot of players we've seen them connected to. I mean, they've been connected to a lot of guys so far. And we've seen some guys that they seem to be connected to, but I think there's a feeling out process of trying to figure out, does this guy fit? Does he fit what they need? Does he fit in an ACC game? Is he going to be able to contribute and help at the ACC level? And you're going to ultimately take a guy or two who doesn't fit that mold, who isn't going to contribute at the ACC level. And Dan Oladapo was one of those guys last year who came in as a transfer and didn't really contribute. You'll get those guys, and who knows, maybe you get one or two of those guys first. But the priority and the goal is finding those guys who can help you win in this conference. And so there are even guys that we've seen them connected to, and I'm not sure if they can help them win in this conference. The coaching staff is trying to find out. So that's really been the news out of basketball, is just the continued pursuit of transfers to come in and help next year. Now, on the football side, there was some news. Pat Narduzzi, finally, a contract extension at Pitt. It's going to keep him here on paper through the 2030 season. And it's the damnedest thing with this contract extension. It was announced on Monday. It's been done for a little while. It's been talked about, I think, expected since December is when we first started. There were rumblings that it was going to be done. And the reality is, and I think the first thing, if anybody wants to start talking about, like, why does Narduzzi need a contract extension? I know he won the ACC, but do you really need to extend him right now? Is he in high demand or something? Well, no. The first thing you start off is sort of a basic reality of college sports. That his current contract before the extension was set to run through the 2024 season. That's a problem. It's a problem because he's currently trying to recruit guys in the classes of 2023 and 2024. As you're recruiting players in those classes, when your contract ends in the 2024 season, it's tough to do. Because you're recruiting guys who, the 2023 kids, if you are done at the end of your contract, right now, before this extension, the finish line was that 2024 season, which means these guys you're recruiting in the 2023 class are going to have 2 years with you. And the 24 class is going to have 1 year with you. And you can't recruit under those circumstances. You can't recruit in that situation, or it's very difficult to recruit in that situation because guys are thinking long term. Guys are looking down the road. Families are looking down the road and saying, are you going to be here to take care of my son and help him through his college career and help him graduate and prepare for the next level? And if your contract is set to run out in the middle of when these guys are going to be at your school, that gets tough to do. And so when you come up to about 2 years out from the end of a contract, it's pretty standard to do an extension of some kind. Now, it's Pat Narduzzi's good fortune that as he came up to that 2-year window, he won the ACC and went to a New Year's Six Bowl and won 11 games and had the best season of Pitt football in 40 years. Good timing, Pat. way to put that one together. You had your best season at the best time, and I think he was able to parlay that into a pretty good contract extension. Obviously, he got the years. 9 more seasons. 5 seasons, 6 seasons, 7 seasons on top of what he already had a contract for. But probably, I would say, not more importantly to Narduzzi, I get the impression with Pat Narduzzi that the years, that's what's important. He wants that sort of contract guarantee, that stability of having a bunch of years left. Jamie Dixon was that way too. Always talked about Jamie Dixon angling for a new contract. I never got the impression that he ever got a huge or significant raise. He just wanted the years. He wanted the contract to be extended so he could have that sort of security and that peace of mind. And he's never said this to me. Pat Narduzzi's never said this to me. But I sort of feel like he would probably be the same kind of guy, that he wants the years. He wants to have the security and the stability for himself and his family. He doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who lives large and wants to get to $5 million a year or $6 million a year or something like that he's going to hold their feet to the fire over it to get the money, but he might hold their feet to the fire over it to get the years. So that's just my take. But I think the other thing that was really important to Narduzzi, and he's said as much this week and since spring camp started, was getting raises for the assistant coaches. And I'll say as sort of a preface that over the last 5 years, I think Pitt, and actually 6 years, we'll go back to 2016 on this. I think Pitt has been aggressive in keeping the coaches they want to keep. If there are assistant coaches on the staff that Pat Narduzzi wants to keep on the staff, Pitt has been aggressive in trying to keep them. You go back to Matt Canada, and that's an instance where they failed, but they were willing to pay him $1 million a year to be the offensive coordinator. It's an absurd amount of money for Pitt to pay an assistant coach, a coordinator, but an assistant coach. But they were willing to pay that money. And since then, I think they've continued to be aggressive when they needed to be aggressive and when they wanted to be aggressive. The fact that Charlie Partridge is still on this staff is a testament to that. The fact that Corey Sanders is still on this staff is a testament to that. The fact that some of the recruiting support guys, some of the guys in the recruiting department are still at Pitt is a testament to that. And I think there are probably a few more that I haven't heard about. This, in the last month or two seems like it was sort of a sweeping, everybody got a raise type of thing because, well, they deserve it and they earned it and they won the ACC. And I think Narduzzi wanted to take care of those guys. And so he said from the start that was a priority. And it seems like that priority was met and addressed. And I think that was important for him. So, long way of saying Pat Narduzzi got his contract extension. And those were sort of the main goals. And it was a funny thing to see. Like I say, we've all expected this since December, right? We've talked about how he's going to get a contract extension. But outside the Pitt fan base and outside the Pitt media and outside Pitt, just sort of in the national media or national fans, I mean, even beyond like Penn State fans and West Virginia fans with their regular trolling, there was a lot of negative reaction to this contract. Part of it was due to the length, the fact that it goes to 2030, which I can understand, that's a long time. But part of it was just this feeling of, what has Narduzzi really done? And it was funny to see sort of a role reversal here where a lot of people on the outside were saying that, but Pitt fans were saying, this is good. This is what we want. Now, we'll see if they're still saying that if they lose to West Virginia, they lose to Tennessee, or God forbid they lose to Western Michigan again. We'll see what Pitt fans have to say about the contract extension then. I'm sure it'll get brought up. Whenever they lose a game this season, the contract extension will get brought up. I have no doubt about that. But it was interesting to see because Pitt fans largely seem pretty good with this, feel pretty positive about it, and actually are glad that Narduzzi is taken care of and seems settled in to staying here for a long time. And if he serves out the contract, he will be here for a long time. And, I was thinking about Narduzzi, and we toss around the word stability a lot. We talk about stability. And certainly in the aftermath of the contract extension, that was talked a lot about. And I feel like it's still important. I feel like it's the kind of thing that Pitt still craves and Pitt still needs, and I think they have, and I think they're glad to have. I don't think it's as strong of a talking point as it was 7 years ago, in the aftermath of the Dave Wanstead firing, and then Mike Haywood, and then Todd Graham, and then Paul Chryst leaves. There was a lot of instability, and there was a deep desire for stability. And Pat Narduzzi said this on Tuesday, I think, when we talked to him, that Patrick Gallagher wanted someone who was going to stick around, the chancellor, when he hired Pat Narduzzi, because remember, there was no athletic director at the time. But he wanted a head coach who was going to stick around. It wasn't going to just jump and run or cut and run. It wasn't going to jump to another job. He wanted stability. And that was a big talking point in December of 2014 and heading into 2015. It still carries some, it's still important. I don't think it's as strong of a talking point as it was back then. But I have been thinking about it a lot this week in the wake of the contract extension. And I think, on one hand, there's stability of having the people the same people in place, same people kind of running the show, same people doing this, same people doing that. That's a form of stability, obviously a big part of it. And I think that's part of what's appealing to Pitt about having Narduzzi here long term. But there's also on-field stability, sort of a stability of results. And I think we don't talk about that quite as much. And you go back and forth. I mean, look, you can. I had the numbers written down. He's like, Narduzzi's 53-37 overall at Pitt, but once you start whittling it down into, I think ACC's 36-22, something like that, or 36-26, something like that. And then you get down to like, non-conference games. If you get down to the Power 5 non-conference games, Pat Narduzzi is 2-11 at Pitt. That includes bowl games. Obviously, the losses, the Michigan State and Northwestern. The 2 wins, of course, were Penn State in 2016 and then Tennessee this past season. 2-11 against Power 5 competition, non-conference, not very good. But I think when you look at the overall of what Pat Narduzzi has done and what the last 7 years have been for Pitt football, I think what you see is a floor has been established. And Narduzzi has done a pretty good job of holding above that floor and then most recently pushed through the ceiling. You know what I mean? To really sort of achieve stability in your on-field results, you need to set, occasionally raise and stay above the floor. Okay, whatever floor that you set, and then you need to occasionally push through the ceiling, raise the roof, so to speak. And I think when you look at it, 2015, his first season, they go 8-5, competitive in the ACC. I want to say they went 6-2 that year. Should have my media guide out. The next year, 2016, obviously, they get the Penn State win, they get the Clemson win, they go 8-5 again. Didn't do as well in the ACC that year. I think they were 5-3 that season, or maybe even 4-4. I should have the media guide up, but it was an 8-win season with some notable wins. 2017, Narduzzi's worst season. He goes 5-7. He has quarterback issues, was really the biggest problem. But then they cap it with a huge upset win in the finale at Heinz Field. 2018. I know you get distracted by the 7-7 record. You get distracted by the Sun Bowl. But the reality is, that team was 7-7. They won the Coastal Division, and they did it by playing, one of the best stretches of football that, I think we had seen at Pitt in a long time, where you go, after, the North Carolina loss, they go to Central Florida, and they don't even look like they belong on the same field. It's going terrible, and then they come home to play a ranked Syracuse team. They beat them in overtime. Then they go out to Notre Dame and put up a really good battle against a top 5 opponent on the road, and had a real chance to win against a top 5 opponent on the road. It was a good loss if ever there was one. They come home, they beat Duke sort of in a real shootout that went down to the wire. They go to Virginia on a Friday night in prime time and beat Virginia, a ranked team, to sort of take control of the Coastal Division. They come home against Virginia Tech, who had been a problem for the previous 2 years, and they just throttle them with a running game that was dominant, beat them by 30. And then they go to Wake Forest with an opportunity to clinch the Coastal Division, and they pull it off. And no matter what happened after that, that stretch of games was really strong and really impressive. And it was a team that really kind of took control of its own destiny. And then for a lot of reasons, they lost at Miami, they got throttled by Clemson, and they had the disaster against, Stanford in the Sun Bowl. But I think when you look at winning the Coastal, and you look at the way they won the Coastal, I think you can say, even though that was a 7-win season, you felt like you were not below the floor on that season. The next year they go 8-5. Not really a very good season, but they did have the win over UCF, and plus Pat Narduzzi's first win in a bowl game, even if it took them until the final 50 seconds to do it against Eastern Michigan. 2020, they go 6-5. It's the COVID year. It's weird. I'm not really holding that one against anyone. They lost Kenny Pickett and went through some real issues, but I thought they rebounded and finished strong. And then 2021, obviously, they go out and they win the ACC. They win 11 games. Again, the best season in 40 years. And so I think when you look year to year, Narduzzi has pretty firmly established a floor, pretty consistently stayed above that floor, the floor being right around 8 wins. He's pretty consistently stayed above that floor. And then he's also shown, finally, in year 7, he showed an ability to kind of push through the ceiling and achieve at a higher level. And so I think there is a stability in the on-field results, a consistency that you can rely on. And you don't want to rely on only winning 8 games every year. But I think the baseline, and we've talked about this before for Pitt, of what what is a realistic expectation in any given season, you got to win 8 games. You know what I mean? It has to be the bare minimum. It has to be a case where everything you do every season, you're not working to get to 8. You're working to build from 8. That's the point that you need to get to if you're Pitt. And I think they have they've had that opportunity. I mean, each of their 8-win seasons, well, I guess 2015 to 2016, they both of those ended with a loss, so there's an opportunity to push ahead of 8. 2019, they needed the extra game to get to 8 wins, so that one wasn't quite there. But they've been able to stay around that area and have an opportunity to push through pretty consistently. And then you saw obviously what happened this past year. Does Pat Narduzzi have his flaws on the field, off the field? Yeah. Game day, yeah. Game prep, yeah. I think he does a lot of things really well. I think he has some areas where you could go back and second guess some things. He would probably not like it if you did, but you could. I think he's also shown an ability to adjust, in a game, but also over the course of time, adjust recruiting philosophy, adjust approaches to offense and defense. He has hired offensive coordinators based on what the team needed. And based on what the program needed, going from Cheney to Canada to Watson to Whipple and now to Cignetti. I think each of those guys you can look at and say, this guy filled what they needed. Cheney was, looked like a good hire, a guy with a lot of Power 5 experience. Pat Narduzzi needed someone he had worked with before, so he hired Matt Canada. Pat Narduzzi needed someone who was going to stay with the program, who wasn't going to bail at the first chance to go, and so he hired Sean Watson. Pat Narduzzi needed somebody who was going to fix the passing game, so he hired Mark Whipple, and he needs somebody who's going to at least put a little bit of balance in the offense, and so he hired Frank Cignetti. He has been willing to say, well, I hired that guy for that reason. That didn't work out. I see now what I need to do a little bit more of. I need to have a little more focus on the passing game. I need to have a little more focus on balance. And I think that's a sign of a growing coach. I think that's the sign of a developing coach, a guy who is learning, who's willing to look at what he's done, willing to look at his own decisions, be critical of them to an extent, and adjust and try something different. He's been willing to do that. His defense is still going to have its flaws. His defense is still going to get exposed by really good passing attacks. But he also seems to understand, and I'm not sure at what point he came to the realization. Probably didn't happen immediately or overnight, but I think it's probably gradual. But he understands that he needs teams that can score. I guarantee he was not upset with the offense in 2016, outside of maybe the Syracuse game. He was definitely not upset with the offense last year. He knows you need to score points to win games. And I think that is an adjustment from who he was when he arrived at Pitt in December of 2014. And so you see a coach who has grown, still has room to continue growing, has more or less established a floor for the on-field results and stayed above that floor for the most part. Also shown an ability to push through the ceiling and raise the bar of where you can get, while also, I think, cultivating a very good assistant coaching staff. And ultimately just building a strong foundation for the program. All the things that happen behind the scenes, all the things we don't see, all the things they don't put out press releases about, from facilities to organization. I think he's done a good job putting it all together. I think he's a good coach for Pitt. I really do. I thought that 7 years ago. I continue to think it now. And even at points where there were flaws, I continue to think, I still, there will be rough moments there. Certainly there have been over the last 7 years. Moments of doubt, right? But I still just kind of felt like, yeah, I think he's the guy, though. I think he's still the guy. He just needs to, he needs to work on this or he needs to work on that. And to his credit, he has. So those are my thoughts on the extension. As far as the length, I'm sort of one of these guys that looks at any of these college coaching contracts and I don't really blink too much at the length of them. And it's funny to say that when, we spent so much time talking about the length of contracts and buyouts and all those things and how it could hamstring a program or an athletic department or kind of, put them in a box as far as what they're able to do with moves and changes and firings and hirings and whatnot. But I still don't really kind of blink too much at it. I think, yeah, sign him up until 2030. He's happy because he's got the years. You're happy because you've got him locked in. And ideally, everybody can stay together and be a big happy family for all eternity, right? or at least through 2030. All right, we got a lot of comments and questions in here. I really appreciate everybody jumping in. Got a couple. Let's see here. Couple super chatters. Want to get to that. RJC Man 38 already shouted you out. We appreciate it. Byron Fleck is a super chatter. I don't see. I don't know if you got a comment or a question there, man. So I don't. If you got something, put it up there. We'll get to it. Let's see what we got. Brock Madonic says, "Do you expect Pitt to land another transfer or two once spring ends? And your thoughts on the new transfer, Tyler Wiltz?" That's a good. Actually, yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, Brock. I almost forgot about it. Over the weekend, Pitt got a commitment from Tyler Wiltz, a linebacker transfer from Missouri State. This is an interesting guy, and I like a story like his because grows up in small town Louisiana, just outside Lafayette, and 45 minutes from Baton Rouge or something like that. But a small town Louisiana, he goes to Southern Arkansas or someplace, some D2 school, ends up leaving there after a year and goes to a JUCO for a year, and then he goes to Missouri State, which plays at the FCS level, the Missouri Valley Conference. He plays there for the last 3 years, I guess. And he's remarkably productive. You know what I mean? He's a second-team all-conference player. He puts up a ton of tackles. He played 3 games against FBS competition while he was at Missouri State. He played Tulane, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State. 2019, 2020, 2021. And in those 3 games, he had like 23 tackles. I forget what the other number, like 3 or 4 tackles for loss and a fumble recovery and this and that. So he produced against some pretty good competition and just was a really athletic linebacker in Missouri State's defense. And I like this addition for Pitt, and I'll tell you why. We've talked so much about the need for depth at the linebacker position, right? You got Servassier Dennis back. You know about him. You feel great about him. It certainly looks like Solomon DeShields and Bengali Kamara are coming on at the 2 outside linebacker spots. DeShields at the star and Kamara at the money. And those guys have been, the talk of spring camp. They look like $1 million. They look like NFL players. Just walking through, excuse me, the eye test, first guys off the bus. They look like they should be in the NFL. We'll see how they play once they actually get into games, but they look outstanding. So you feel good about that, but you need depth to develop behind them. You got Brandon George coming back. He's a good backup middle linebacker. Potentially could step into the top group if Servassier Dennis needs to slide outside to one of the outside spots, or if Dennis just needs a break. Shane Simon came in as a transfer from Notre Dame. He'll be at the money position, working with or backing up Bengali Kamara. But you still need somebody at the star. And that's that wide side of the field, sort of a hybrid safety, strong safety, outside linebacker, hybrid position. And, they've been using Buddy Mack there, who's a converted safety. He's been getting practice time there. Aiden Henningham, who's a third-year guy, has been getting time there. But they really needed to develop that depth with those guys and potentially with additions. And that's where this Tyler Wiltz fits in. And I think some people might have looked at it and said, Missouri State, this is really what you're relying on for a linebacker? Well, no, you're relying on him for a linebacker depth. And I mean, he's coming in ready to fight for a position. He believes he can play at the highest level, and that's what he's coming in to do. And so, I'm not gonna count him out for anything. Go get him. He's worked hard at every level he's been at. He's worked hard to get to this level, the FBS level and the Power 5 level. But I think at the very worst, you're going to get some solid depth out of him for 1 year. It's a 1-year commitment. So, I think it's a good addition. They had a couple extra scholarship spots. By my count, they're still projected to have at least one more after, Preston Levant left and Davis Bevel left. By my count, that put them at a projection for 83 this season. So, Tyler Wiltz takes up one of those. That leaves another open spot that could go to another transfer, like Brock said, or, you would think at some point Sam Scarton's going to need to go on scholarship if he continues to be their primary place kicker, along with Ben Sauls. But then you get into the tricky conversation of, do you have 2 kickers plus a punter on scholarship? all at the same time, and I'm not sure if that's necessarily ideal either. So we'll see how that situation shakes itself out. But to Brock's question, do I expect Pitt to land another transfer or two once spring ends? I mean, the reality is they're probably going to lose another transfer or two. Just seems, I don't have any inside info on who's going to go or anybody who's going to do this or that, but it's 2022. If you bet on transfers leaving, you're probably going to be right. And so I'm sure Pitt is probably going to lose one or two. And then, they'll have open spots to potentially bring in another tight end if they need another tight end, or another quarterback if they lose another guy off. I mean, right now they have Keaton Slovis, Nick Patty, and Joey Yellen. Nate Arnell has been limited this spring, but that's your scholarship roster. If they lose one of those guys, and they want, they could want another quarterback to come in. It wouldn't be the worst thing to do. So I could see it happening, Brock. I'm not going to predict anything right now. Like I say, they're projected to have one open spot, so we'll see what they do with that one spot. Let's see. Will Z says, "Hey Chris, was on the premium board, saw a thread that was pretty heavy. Nick Patty versus Keaton Slovis debate, questioning Keaton Slovis's ability due to injury. I was just wondering where you fall on the debate." I thought Will Z. I thought you were starting another statement there. Slovis and Patty. I mean, right now, from everything we've heard, Keaton Slovis, the transfer from USC, is ahead of Nick Patty. Just probably mostly based on physical skills. They're both older players. They're both veteran guys. Nobody has any experience in Frank Cignetti's offense, so they're all sort of learning it at the same time. And then, so it comes down to who can master the offense, and it comes down to who's got the better physical tools. And I think Slovis is a better passer than Patty. I mean, I think you can watch his tape from USC and you can watch Patty's tape from Pitt and see that he's got the better arm strength. I don't know if he runs as well as Nick, because Nick's sort of sneaky good runner, and we've seen that over the years. But I think Slovis is the better quarterback prospect, and so he seems to be ahead by all accounts. He seems to be playing well and having a good spring. The injury stuff is interesting. I mean, he's had a shoulder injury. He had a neck injury. He had a couple injuries at USC his last year or two. And that, I don't know if I would say it's concerning, because by all accounts, he's healthy and good to go. But, it's something to watch out for. When Keaton Slovis committed to Pitt, there were, you kind of reached out to USC people and talked to USC people. And they said, he struggled in his last year there, largely due to injury. And so you start to wonder, okay, is he going to come back from that injury? Does he have any lingering effects of those injuries? A shoulder injury or elbow, whatever it was, some kind of arm injury. You wonder, how are you going to hold up? But from everything we heard, like I say, by all accounts, he's doing really well. And so it's tough, because I really like Nick Patty. I like Nick Patty for a lot of different reasons. I mean, I always liked interviewing him when he was a recruit. I like interviewing him now. We get a chance to talk to him over the last couple years that he's been at Pitt. I think he's a nice kid. I think he's a smart kid. I like him. He's a nice guy. And I also like kind of what he's done for this program and how he's been willing to work behind Kenny Pickett for the last 4 years, and just kind of sort of wait his turn, but sort of also just understand his role and fill his role, and understand that he was the backup. He needed to be ready in case Kenny Pickett had to miss time, and he embraced that role, and he dove into it head first, and he was a good soldier. You know what I mean? And so I admire that about Nick Patty. I appreciate that about Nick Patty. But at the same time, if this whole thing goes down and things continue the way they are, and Keaton Slovis ends up being the starter for Pitt, I can't fault Nick Patty if he's like, all right, man, I'm good. I'm gonna go. And I think everybody at Pitt would be disappointed to see him leave. I would be disappointed to see him leave. But I can't fault him if that's what he decides to do. If he decides, for 4 years I've been the backup guy waiting my turn. This is supposed to be my turn now. Whether I got beat out, fairly or unfairly, whatever it is, I gotta go. I gotta find another place where I can go and I can play. I can't fault him for that. And I he'll find some kinds of opportunities if that's what he decides to do. I'd love to see him come back and be like, yep, I'm going to do whatever I can for Pitt. I love Pitt. I'm going to be whatever this team needs me to be. If that's the backup, if it's a starter, I'll do it. I would love it if Nick Patty said that. I don't know if that's the decision he's going to make if things keep going the way that they've been going. So, I'm not sure what's going to happen there. My guess is that Keaton Slovis will be Pitt's starting quarterback in 2022. Benjamin Glazer asks, on the portal question, is the genie out of the bottle? Will there be any kind of regulation, or is the current way it works going to be the norm going forward? I don't think you're going to see much movement from the NCAA or from the conferences. I don't think they're going to be doing much anytime soon to restrict player movement. I do think that genie's out of the bottle, and not necessarily in a Pandora's box kind of way. No, genie out of the bottle is a better way to put it. Not necessarily in a negative way. I mean, I think there needed to be a little bit less restrictions on player movement. And now that they've lifted some of those restrictions, I don't see them putting new restrictions in. What I'll be interested to see is if I'll be interested to see how NIL money moves forward. If it ultimately becomes something that the schools can sort of directly organize and directly facilitate, and if you get into contract situations and the players are sort of locked in, almost the way like colleges, have the grant of rights, where they grant their media rights to the conference, basically. And it basically is like, any money we make from TV or whatever goes to the conference, and even if we leave, it's going to go to that old conference, the whole grant of rights thing, right? It'll be interesting to see if student athletes, as they become more and more compensated and become closer to actual employees, are then sort of, if there's something similar that happens where they have to grant those rights to the university, which then would actually end up restricting the player movement to some extent. But then, I think you start going too far down the path and you start talking about, labor organizing, right? I mean, that's sort of where I think, if you jump 5-6 steps ahead, I think that's probably where you end up, is with student athletes unionizing. Maybe all student athletes, maybe just student athletes in certain sports. I don't know how. Maybe just within a conference, maybe just within the Power Five. I do think you continue to move the Power Five further and further away. You move closer and closer to full autonomy and potentially even breaking off from the NCAA, and then they can make their own rules. I think as we're still moving through NIL money, right? It's been less than a year. And so as you continue to move through this and things sort of settle into how it's going to work and what it's going to look like and what it's going to mean for the players and what it's going to mean for the universities, and you've got alumni forming groups to sort of facilitate these NIL deals to get money in the hands of the players and get money in the hands of the recruits, it's one step along the way that moves toward the players being more fully compensated as employees, as revenue-generating employees. And once you get to that point, you start getting in, inevitably, if it gets to the point where the universities and conferences are directly compensating student athletes, which why wouldn't it eventually get to that point? But if it gets to that point, then it's going to become contractual. Then it will be you sign a 2-year contract to play here. Right? It's not hard to imagine that. But before the student athletes will start signing those, they'll unionize, they'll organize, and there'll be, would it surprise you if 10 years from now there are collective bargaining agreements between the players and university administration or conference officials? Maybe it works through the conference. Maybe that's how it goes. It works through the conference. Would it surprise you at all if that was the case? It wouldn't surprise me. I think. And we're a few steps away from that. We're not. That's not the next thing that's going to happen. I think there are a few more cards or dominoes that have to fall to get to that point. Like I say, it might be 10 years. But just what we've seen over the last what is this now? It's almost April. So you're talking about the last 9 months? Just what we've seen over the last 9 months with NIL and transfer portal and how those two have sort of functioned together and what the NIL deals have looked like and how they've evolved. I mean, that's, it's not hard to see it taking a few more steps. So yeah, I mean, is the genie out of the bottle? It is. Will there be any kind of regulation? I think to some extent, but it's going to take a while before we get to the point where it restricts player movement. Byron Fleck, who is a super chatter, we appreciate it. There's your question. He says, hypothetical question for you. Say Pitt football loses the first 3 games to West Virginia, Tennessee, and Western Michigan. All possible. Is Heather Lyke on the hot seat? Heather Lyke's not going to get fired for the football program losing. All right. If they lose games next year, it's not going to put Heather Lyke on the hot seat. Heather Lyke would go on the hot seat if there were major institutional issues beyond just bad contracts, but major institutional issues, ethics issues, HR issues, things like that. Those would put her on the hot seat. If she, makes unsound financial decisions, and again, I'm not talking about contracts, but I'm talking about allocation of budget and how the athletic department sort of uses its money, then she could potentially be on the hot seat. If they lose to West Virginia, she's not getting called into the principal's office on Monday morning or Friday morning, I guess, because that game's on Thursday night, right? And because of this new contract, Pat Narduzzi won't be on the hot seat either. So, no, hypothetically, no, I don't think so. Dave Yark says, is May 18th the deadline for 2022 men's basketball recruits to sign NLI's, National Letter of Intent, not NIL. Yeah, it gets confusing sometimes. Transfers or otherwise. Yeah, there is a date, Dave. I forget. May 18th sounds right. It's mid-May, where transfers have to be signed and committed, I think, to play the next year to be able to use that year of immediate eligibility. So, yeah, they do. There is sort of I don't want to say a light at the end of the tunnel, but there is a finish line with the transfer portal and that kind of thing. I don't know if that applies to recruits. I think that's for transfers, Dave. I want to say, and I'll double check on all this, but transfers to use, I believe for a first-time transfer to use the immediate eligibility, they have to be signed with the school by a certain date. You might be right, it might be May 18th. I don't think recruits are the same way. I think recruits can go into the summer because they're a high school kid picking a college, But I mean, I could be wrong about that, but that's my understanding. But transfers do have that cutoff date where they have to get there. You're right. Let's see. A lot of RJ Seaman, you got a lot to say, and I don't even know what. Here, I'll pick your comment. RJ Seaman 38, you're a super chatter, so we definitely want to read one of your comments. We have a lot of comments out there, so I'm going to say I'm going to read this one. He says, if you look at Virginia Tech and Frank Beamer, it took 6 or 7 years to build that program. Pitt finally has a coach to challenge Jock Sutherland's legacy for the longest tenure. Yeah, Narduzzi's in the top 5, I think, of games coached as Pitt head coach. So he's definitely moving up in that regard. He's definitely getting up there, and I think he's in total wins. I feel like it's only 3 guys ahead of him in total wins at Pitt. So he's going to he's on his way. He's got a chance to catch some of them. Let's see here. Mike Shaner, I think, when talking about player additions and transfer portal and limiting the transfer portal, Mike Shaner says maybe they could put a cap on the amount of players a school can take in 1 year. Well, they have that. I forget how it works in basketball. I feel like it's certain number over the course of 3 years or 2 years or something, but football has you can give out 25 initial scholarships in a year, in a school year. And what that means is anybody who joins your anybody who goes on scholarship for the first time. It could be a recruit coming in, it could be a transfer coming in, it could be a walk-on that you put on scholarship if they've been in your program for less than 2 years. You get 25 of those. And there's ways you can manipulate those numbers. You can move it around. If you didn't use all 25 the previous year, and you get some guys that enroll in January, you can count them back to the previous year, so you have room for this year. I mean, you can manipulate that number a little bit and try and move it around. But by and large, that's the number you kind of have to work with. And there are also scholarship limits too. Right, Mike? Basketball, you can have 13 scholarship players. Football, you can have 85 scholarship players. And so you have those limits as well. The college, there's only so many guys that colleges can take at any given time. And so there are limits in that way. And you end up seeing guys not finding a home sometimes in the transfer portal because schools fill up. So that does exist. Brock Madonic says, when do you see Pitt landing its first transfer commitment? Do you see Pitt landing any recruits from the 2022 class? All right, so on the matter of the transfers, here's the thing you need to keep an eye on. Tonight, it's March 30th, all right? Tomorrow's March 31st. Thursday is March 31st. Starting tomorrow is a recruiting dead period, which goes until April 7th. Or maybe it starts on Friday. I forget if it starts the 31st or it starts the 1st. But we're coming up on like a week-long recruiting dead period that pretty much goes through the Final Four and the week after it. And what that means, during the recruiting dead period, you can't have any in-person contact. On campus or off campus, you can't have any in-person contact. So recruits can't visit you, and you can't go visit recruits. Now, Pitt can and has, visit recruits this week. They've hosted recruits this week. Transfers I'm talking about. And you could do that, but you're not going to be able to do it for the next week once this dead period starts. And so for Pitt's first transfer commitment, I think the guy you want to keep an eye on is Nelly Cummings. I'm not predicting that he's going to commit to Pitt. Guard from Colgate, originally from Western PA, went to Bowling Green, then transferred to Colgate. Has 1 year of eligibility left as a grad transfer. A guy like him, he's been on campus, he's seen Pitt. He obviously knows it from growing up in the area, and he was on campus recently. And so you might be able to get him during the dead period. For guys that have not been to Pitt or have not been able to visit, or have not been able to really kind of spend time on campus, I think it's going to be hard to get anybody in the next week. You're probably going to need to wait until you can get guys on campus starting the following week, when they can start hosting recruits for visits again, like at noon on April 7th, I think is when the next recruiting period, like live recruiting period, starts. So, you're probably looking ahead to then, because it's, even though transfers are a little unique and they're certainly different from high school recruits, they also do want to see where they would be living for a year or 8 months or however long that year would be after they transfer. So, those guys are still going to want to visit. And I don't know if Pitt would get too many commitments without having a guy visit first. So maybe somebody like Nelly Cummings could commit in the next week. Or he might decide that he wants to wait and he wants to take visits. Maybe that slows up his recruiting process. Kind of see how he decides to plan it out. Philip Alston, forward from Cal, was on campus today. As Brock Madonic points out, he was on campus visiting today, Wednesday. So we'll kind of see what happens there. It's another guy who probably knows a little bit about Pitt. He's had a chance to visit, so he's actually kind of familiar with it. We'll see if he possibly makes a decision. But otherwise, it could be, you could be waiting until, 2 weeks from now or so, week and a half from now, before they get anybody. And do I see Pitt landing any recruits from the 2022 class? I think they're going to try and get. What if I said from the beginning? I said if they end up having like 5 spots or 3 spots or something, I could see them taking or I think I said if they end up with like 5 open scholarships, I could see them taking 3 transfers and 2 high school kids. I still think that very well could be the case. I don't know if that's exactly what they'll do, but I didn't think they were going to get shut out on recruits in the 2022 recruiting class. Just the priority, and it doesn't mean it's the only thing they're working on, but the priority right now is getting transfers, getting guys who are going to be able to come in and help them next season. Help right away and help them win games in the ACC. And I don't know if there are many, if any, high school guys that are out there right now that Pitt has a shot at who are going to be able to come in and help them do that. So, do I think they'll get recruits in the 2022 class? Yeah, I think they'll get 1 or 2. Who knows? Maybe they'll even get 3. If they get the twins, like you mentioned, or maybe a Duthero, local kid. We'll see. We'll see what they end up landing. But I think they'll get somebody out of the high school ranks to go with all the transfers. But the focus is on transfers. And that's what's most important. For the short-term, immediate future, they need to get some good transfers. All right, I think we're coming up to that 9:30 hour, so it's probably about time to roll out. Appreciate everybody who tuned in on the live stream tonight. It's always fun having that conversation. Make sure we'll continue this conversation as soon as this live stream ends. I'm going to go back over to the message boards at Panther-Lair.com and get in, see what posts have gone up, see what threads and replies are bumping right now. I'm going to get back into that stuff, and you should do it too. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source. Pitt sports news on the internet. Football, basketball, recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com, and of course, message boards, where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of your closest Pitt fan friends. Panther-Lair.com. Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Make sure you check that out. RJCman38 says, no beer today? I haven't had a beer on the podcast in a long time. I just, it's middle of the week. I got other things I got to do. Get up early the next morning. I should start drinking again, though. I got water here. But that's about it. Pretty lame. Guess I'm getting old. I don't know. All right, but thanks to everybody who tuned in. I appreciate everybody who listened to the podcast later in the week. Appreciate everybody who checks out the video. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like this video. Subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it very, very much. So thanks again to everybody who tuned in. Hope you have a great rest of the night. Hope you have a great rest of the week. Don't forget, Saturday morning, 8 a.m., 93.7 The Fan, the Panthers Insider Show. Another hour of all Pitt sports talk. And then we'll be back next Wednesday night, 8:30, for another Panther-Lair Show right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great week.